Right now, the president took his show on the road, advocating today against the so-called meat cleaver approach, those spending cuts, also known as a sequester. Meanwhile, the finger pointing, it's going on as usual in D.C. as we tick closer and closer to the deadline. And next, scandal overshadowing the Pope's last days. Accusations flying in Rome, making it all seem a little like, well, frankly, a Dan Brown novel. We'll be joined by an expert who will explain not just the process, but also what lies ahead for the next pontiff. And later, when does something stop being a personal thought and start becoming a crime? It's the stuff out of sci-fi movies, but now it's a real cool question in a real courtroom. What's at issue is that cannibal cop case here. Was he conspiring to kidnap or kill, or just entertaining disturbing personal fantasies? An interesting hour ahead. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thanks so much for joining us this Tuesday evening, February 26. Now, everybody in D.C. and increasingly people across the country, they're starting to talk about the sequester, realizing that this thing's getting realer and realer. Now, if we could only get lawmakers to talk to one another about it, then we're on to something. We are still on track to hit those $85+ billion worth of automatic spending cuts that will happen starting this Friday, as it looks less and less likely that a deal will get done before the deadline. March 1st, not only the day to focus on, but also look about 3.5 weeks later to March 27th. That's the day the current budget deal expires, and without a new one, a government shutdown could occur. Now, with what was once thought to be an impossibility, but the outside chance that lawmakers may push the sequester to the 27th and try to tackle both issues at the same time, a lot of moving parts in Washington as we speak. So what happened today? Well, a whole lot of talking, but seemingly few lawmakers doing any listening. Let's bring in Andrew Whitman, senior political correspondent with the latest. And Andrew, seems like the same story, just a different setting.
It was, Rich, especially today with a focus on words and numbers. We'll start with some of the words. President Obama at a shipbuilder and naval contractor in Virginia today, focusing on the impact of the sequestration cuts.
Instead of cutting out the government spending we don't need, wasteful programs that don't work, special interest tax loopholes and tax breaks, what the sequester does is it uses a meat cleaver approach to gut critical investments in things like education and national security, in life-saving medical research.
Those comments countered by House Speaker John Boehner, who also complained about the sequester cuts, but blamed the president and Senate Democrats instead, and did so in biting fashion.
We have moved a bill in the House twice. We should not have to move a third bill before the Senate gets off their ass and begins to do something.
They were not the only ones talking about sequester cuts today. Lots of experts in lots of fields that could be impacted by the cuts speaking out, including educators.
That may cause certain departments to take cuts. You know, our school system is divided up into departments, and anytime you start cutting departments, it could affect the quality of education that their students receive.
What you're actually doing is taking the students and the schools that are most at risk, and you are reducing the funds, but yet you're still keeping the same mandates and expectations, just with less money.
Nationwide, the sequester could cause up to 10,000 teacher and education layoffs, with schools in our region set to lose as much as $60 million in aid and nearly 900 jobs, and additional cuts to programs for disabled students. Other cuts include to immigration and border security. Immigration and Customs has already released several hundred prisoners from federal custody because under sequester there won't be enough cash or beds to house them all, while other cuts would lead to furloughs for border crossing inspectors. Next up, programs that help feed the elderly.
It's really important for us to get it, I think. And I think we need it. Because at my age now, I'm getting to the place I don't want to cook.
And yet the Meals on Wheels program could face cuts totaling 4 million fewer meals. Lots of focus on FEMA in our region in the wake of Hurricane Sandy, but sequestration could cut FEMA funds to state and local responders. Also expect cuts to preschool programs like Head Start.
Those children and families will have to find preschool opportunities somewhere else. If they can't afford that, then they will not have those opportunities.
Now repeat that 70,000 times. That's the number of kids who could be kicked out of Head Start under sequestration. Other cuts could impact child care and daycare for more than 3,000 lower income kids in our region. Going to the market could be more hazardous after sequestration. 2,100 fewer food inspections possible. Mental health services in the spotlight since the massacre at Newtown. Also on the block, 373,000 people nationwide could lose mental health treatment. People out of work could be hit hard by the sequester. Cuts to job search and training programs and to unemployment benefits.
We've been informed by the U.S. Department of Labor that the employment benefit amounts for long-term unemployed individuals could be cut by as much as, say, 10%.
And remember the rather salty language used by Speaker Boehner when talking about the sequester? The Speaker could hear a lot of that in his home district. The Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, one of the largest employers in Boehner's district, could see up to 13,000 furloughs, all starting this Friday. Rich?
Good times, Andrew. Thank you. All right, let's bring in the rest of the panel here. We start with T.J. McCormick, conservative commentator and host of Good Morning Westchester on WVOX Radio 1460. I sold it, Dominic. Yes. Bad Morning America. Dominic, who I mentioned, political journalist, author, and so much more. Scott Levinson, Democratic political consultant, president of the Advance Group, and a player in the market here. And Andrew, you laughed or snickered throughout that. Yeah. Real numbers here, and I'm hearing coast to coast, nobody feels spared, and depending on who you talk to, they say it's going to be worse than people think, and other people say, you know what, a month later, who's going to notice?
It's like a movie trailer, in a world. Oh my God, the sky is falling. Okay. Is that forever? Richard, guys, are we talking about forever, or are we talking about initially nothing, and then eventually some trickle and some problems, which will all come back together. Everything will get funded again. All those government workers will get back pay who go on furlough. So then why do it? Because you know what? It's time the chickens come home to roost for all of them. Republicans, Democrats, none of which you realize they're working for us who want to stay below the radar. Hold on a minute. And the president. This is all of their problems. Just because that guy gets to stand on the podium and keep campaigning does not remove his responsibility for this. It is the Obama-quester.
Might make good radio, might sell some print, might make a good TV lead-in, but the fact is it's just not going to happen because nobody wants it to happen. Nobody cares if it happens. Nobody's going to see these kind of cuts when a guy like Boehner is going to lose 13,000 jobs in his own district. It just doesn't happen.
When does it happen?
I will bet you good money. You think come Friday you think they're going to have an 11th hour deal?
I think there's no doubt there's going to be an 11th hour deal.
When do we lose the jobs? When do we lose the jobs?
Do you hear the same thing he is? That there's this.
I don't think 11th hour on Friday. I think you're more likely to see something Saturday or Sunday or Monday or something like that. It seems to be the pattern a couple of days after.
But you're just going to get there.
But I'm sorry.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. Just because it's a lose-lose.
But just to counter TJ's.
So why do we go down this road? This is so frustrating.
Because so many of them are in over their heads. How many of these empty suit, vapid politicians really grasp what we're talking about here? I'm not pretending that I know every in and out. All I know is what I read, what we all know. And I honestly don't know how many truly sharp tacks have you met out of Washington? Truly, really people that can grasp this stuff.
Well, to that end, Dominic, though, everybody knows self-preservation in Washington. They may not be able to read a balance sheet, or they can't tell you basically what the numbers really are if they looked at the budget, if they even have done that, right? But they do know how to try and keep their jobs. And to me, what's interesting is if we have that, Senator Johnson, if we could bring up this Republican senator who, when asked about, well, what do you think about, as Scott just said, they'll cut a deal here. They're going to do this because take Speaker Boehner, right? If he doesn't, do a deal, look what he's going to face in his home district. Well, on the thought of him reaching across the aisle and trying to reach some kind of a deal, listen to what this aforementioned Republican senator had to say what would happen to Speaker Boehner.
I don't quite honestly believe that Speaker Boehner would be Speaker if that happens. I think he would lose the speakership.
So I'm saying, at the end of the day, the reason why we're here in part, and the reason why I think the 27th of this month is more realistic than the sober minds of this table do, is because some people say, let it burn. They really believe down deep that the small government types have now outweighed the big defense hawks in the Republican Party. And I'm not so sure. I want them to be right, but I'm not so sure. Before Friday, definitely, or even this weekend or Monday, we're going to have a deal because some people don't see the upside of it. The public doesn't like them anyway, except in their district. And if they can survive the bad press for the local cuts, they're going to say, I did what you sent me to Washington for.
Richard, you're a diplomat because you're referring to these individuals with nice terms. I call them the Tea Party nuts, because that's what they are. it's not just the Tea Party folks. This is about a philosophy. There is a philosophy in the Republican Party that says those Northerners or those people, they're eating up all the government dollars. Cut, cut, cut. I didn't find it funny when Andrew did his piece and we were all snickering and so on, because those safety nets that he was, that's why I'm sitting here tonight. So without those safety nets, I wouldn't be alive.
It's not about to change forever, Dominic. It's not like all of a sudden all this is gone and America's a vast wasteland for the next 6 years. It all comes back in 6 weeks. You know as well as I do.
You're very good on the radio. But to grandma that can't get her warm meal for 6 weeks, what is she going to do? To the person,
she's not going to lose it in the first place.
Wait. To the person that's going to lose part of their unemployment, what are they going to do when they're barely holding on?
When does the sky fall, Dominic? You want to take a cheap shot at me about I'm good on the radio? Tell me here on television. Tell everybody. When does the sky fall, Dominic? When does Grandma lose her meal?
I'm giving you a compliment.
When does Grandma lose her meal?
Grandma could lose her meal starting next week.
Really?
Starting next week.
Really?
Yeah.
TJ, there is some things.
I love you.
That, no. He always says, with all due respect. Then you know you're
I didn't
going
even
to
get one of those this time.
But the point of it is, this isn't hypothetical.
Right.
Now, maybe Scott's right here. The political math certainly says he makes some sense here. That him and Andrew said there's too much downside to let it go on.
Right.
I'm not so sure, just because I've seen the last 4+ years. I've seen this show go on, and I see less downside for them. This is the only leverage Republicans really have to play, frankly, okay?
Right.
So if this goes on, forget about if it's a week, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. You're missing the point. This has to, by statute, go into effect come Friday. Now, on personnel, they have to give 30 days notice. So some of the furloughs and some of the terminations won't take place for 30 days. But for the cuts and for the programs, they must take effect day one. And even to reverse this, the dysfunction and the inefficiencies to me are mind-boggling.
And it lands at the president's feet. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I just think the framework of this is the only leverage the Republicans have is exactly the mindset that got the Republicans in trouble. And why what you're really seeing now is a fractured party. And if you look at every one of these partisan debates,
didn't this in one way work? The president yesterday talked about reforming Medicare and that he has to make some structural changes to the entitlement. We happen to think that there's some logic to it, but my point is, would he have said that if they weren't driving him to the 11th hour on this deal?
He may have, and probably not. But more importantly, if you get into these partisan debates every time with it's a win or lose situation for the party, then you're not doing the governing that people actually sent you to do. You're just doing partisan politics.
But do you think he could do more than he is, the president?
I think everybody in Washington can do more than what's being done because it takes the hard, smart work that TJ
Richard,
I just don't see an appetite for
Richard,
it.
I really want to ask you this question. I think that, and maybe piggyback off to TJ, that a lot of Americans feel that we should be fiscal and responsible when it comes to the budget. We all know that cuts have to take place. But when is the Republican Party going to understand that their branding and what they want to do is so far out on the fringes that nobody wants these things?
Because you know what? You're right on national levels, but the way the districts are now constructed, that somebody said this to me yesterday, the Republican House member nationally might have a 7% approval rating. They got nothing to lose. Make it 5, make it 4. What do they have to lose? Back home in the district, they're considered a hero against Washington. And that's the problem with these constructed districts right now. I really think for the next year and a half, we're going to get more and more
unless the cut impacts their district. And then they whine like a little baby, and they don't want the cut. They don't want the cut to take place.
You have national Republican leadership who are aggressively reaching out to Latinos for the first time, aggressively reaching out to gay and lesbians for the first time.
Well, you know what? You just helped me with a segue. We're going to be talking about that after the break. And when we return, though, within the Republican Party, some of the outreach to groups here that they didn't embrace certainly this past November, but also what about some of the rising stars and whether or not they're accepted with open arms, like none other than the man on your screen, Governor Chris Christie. Not conservative enough? Well, apparently, if you believe the votes at CPAC, that is true here. Do you buy that? We'll get into that and a lot more in Real Politics. Stay with us.